Welcome back to Exploring Distant Worlds. We're a little over a year further in, and this is the culmination of the battle in Almanea. We're attacking Secret End, the main base nearby of the Savage Sun Network. And you can see their shields and their firepower stronger than the Dreyfus battle that we had against the Black Market Cartel. But we're going to be skipping around a fair amount now at this point to avoid sort of tedious micromanagement. Still want to catch all of the highlights, of course. Examples like this where we've got a new design of ship going out. We want to see how effective they are. And also, let's take a look at our pirate overview. So this is where we're fighting at the moment. We can see we've noticed a couple of these here are fairly weak. Some of the other ones out here are also weak. Some of them are a little more powerful. And of course the Lone Pirates Libya export over here. And this is the Sinister Salvage. But this is really going to clear out this section, at least as far as we've explored it so far. And we want to colonize a planet over in here next. So really getting rid of them is a key strategic point for us at this time. Now we did also meet a couple of new empires. This over here is something like the Salajas Sovereignty. You can see the dark blue, it's there, very hard to read. We also had contact information sold to a race of Mortallons. Mortallan Commonwealth, I think they are, and I don't know where they are, but you can see we do know where the Catame Dominion is now. We've got a free trade agreement with them. If we take a look at our new friends, Mortallan Commonwealth, here we go. They're fairly well predisposed to us, although they are quite weak. And Salajas Sovereignty here, they're Caidians, humanoid family. They don't like us as much, so we're going to maybe need some work to get them on our side. Now, taking a look at where we're sitting here overall, we have actually popped up just over the halfway point. Now, the rest of it's going to be much more difficult because we've just got to get larger in order to do it. We're not going to go much further with our race victory conditions, a couple more agreements, and then the rest of it is simply going to be about becoming a massive empire. Now, the Salajas Sovereignty here, they are smaller than us, but they do have some good progress being made on their victory conditions. They're not breaking any treaties. Longest lasting defense pact and free trade agreement, I think they're cheating on those because you can see it's got us listed as the longest one in each of those, but it's still giving them 100% credit. So I'm not a big fan of how that's working out for us. Perform the most research in the galaxy, and they're almost up to the top on that. So an advanced race, even if they aren't particularly large, and they have almost perfect score for their victory conditions. And then way down at the bottom, we have the terrible and pathetic Mortallan Commonwealth at only 7% total, and they have 0 for their race victory conditions. They're a very aggressive, militaristic race who doesn't have the power to pull it off. Most experienced general, admiral, destroy the most troops, subjugate the most empires, conquer the most colonies. They haven't done any of it. Kind of sad sack and pathetic there. Now, in terms of our colonies, we are still enduring some resource shortages. We've had some fighting happen in the Akuro system, and there's actually one ship that was almost completely destroyed, attacks from the Lone Pirates primarily, and we do have a construction ship actually on the way to repair that. We also did some retrofitting here and built a few more marine ships to try to capture some more of the enemy. I had mostly non-marine ships in here initially. I'm fairly happy with the total amount here at the moment, almost 1,000 firepower, but it was about half that before we did all the retrofitting. But that consumed a bunch of the resources here, and our freighters are struggling to keep up. If we sort of pop in and look at how they're doing, and we sort their mission here, you can see there's a handful here that don't have a mission. There's a whole bunch of escape. But if we come down to where it says transport, okay, so that's less than half the way down, maybe 2/3 roughly have transport if we just scale all the way down here. So they're working pretty hard. They're just not quite able to get everything done that we need them to. And so if we look at Akuro, we've got, growth penalties happening here, and so does Brax. And Brax, actually, the spaceport there is kind of in a rough situation. It still needs a little bit more carbon fiber in order to finish the very, very last component that it needs. And we actually have plenty of carbon fiber to use. You can see, okay, almost 12,000, but it just needs to get delivered there, so we're kind of waiting on all of those freighters. Now, we do have pretty good development going on We have some increasing population growth, over 8% on Brax and 16% on Kuro. Now, that still doesn't give us as much raw population growth as we're getting on Reese. But the point is, we are continuing to make progress in developing those economies. But we want to hold off on doing any more colonization until the freighters get caught up. We don't really have anything new going on the character side. I want to keep Ubi Saxul, our ambassador, over on Kaidanea because we're still working on trying to get a mutual defense pact. We don't have that yet, and we really haven't gotten anybody new in here now in quite some time that is all continuing their gradual development. Now on the research side, we're going to be finishing up weapons in a little over a year probably till we wrap that up. We have the research coming in here. That's going to give us the Rusan tech installation, so we've paused our shipbuilding for a bit in order to be able to pay for that as soon as it rolls in. And then eventually coordinated control and rolling up to our marshy swamp colonization. But the immediate attention needs to go to energy and construction. Now we have no more wonders coming up anytime soon, but we're almost done with advanced maneuvering. And that means we need to take the trip up to Tier 4. And before I finish all of Tier 4, I'm going to jump up the ship size again as usual, but what are some critical items we can see in this tier to get? And these are all items going to take roughly a year to research at this stage. Well, the damage control we talked about a little bit before, but the standard one actually does not allow you to repair components in the field, but you get that 40% damage reduction. You can see the size that it takes up is 4. And then compared to that, our special racial tech, the S2F7 repair bot, half the size, much better damage reduction, and does repair components. So this is really a big advantage that we have. It'd be great to not be able to go back and have to repair all the time, just have to go back when it's time to refuel. So we're going to definitely want to grab that fairly quickly. Energy collection, mining, those would be good, but they're not particularly critical. Thrusters the same. Now we've got some of our engines here to consider. And our current proton thrusters, 670 thrust, size of 7, and we're going to move that up to 800 thrust, size of 7. Now this does require more energy, but still that's over 110 thrust to size ratio. Let's keep that number in mind. So the high volume thrust here, that's about 90 thrust to size ratio, also requires the same amount of energy. So this would not be as good initially until we advance up to the next tier. Note that we're eventually going to want to get both sides of this to go to further advanced engines in the future, but we're just talking about what we want right now. And then efficient energy conversion, okay, the energy is better, but the thrust to size ratio again is quite bad. Now the high volume one here, actually a little bit better maximum output from the sprint engine, but I think overall definitely just grabbing this improvement and being able to have them acquire that, of course, without having to retrofit, always an advantage. Then we've got our inhibitors, don't need to really work on them anymore right now. We have no need to upgrade to this final level of the Garrix hyperdrive. It leads to nothing. And comparing that to our Equinox that we already have, well, the only benefit here we get is literally 1 second faster for the Garrix, and everything else is better for the Equinox. Still a little bit faster, a little bit less energy usage, actually a fair amount less energy usage. It's smaller. I'm sticking with this. And the efficient hyperdrives, okay, lower energy but also lower speed. I prefer the higher speed, not just for getting places faster, but also for conserving fuel, taking off some of those fuel cells and being able to use weapons in that space. And then the fast jump hyperdrives, being able to jump fast, again, not worth the sacrifice in speed. It's a big sacrifice in speed, not a small one. So, in my opinion, I want to stick with Equinox. Then the shields. We're actually going to want all 3 of these fairly quickly. The shield reinforcement here is going to be a moderate boost to our Corvidian shields, but it leads to the planetary shield. So that's why we're definitely going to want that one eventually. And then we have the Ducalios shields, the intensified shields. They're stronger, not quite as good recharge rate. And then the Talassos shields are weaker, but they have a better recharge rate, which can really be helpful for ships or bases that are doing a lot of fighting, because the shields are taking months and months to recharge. And I actually think it can work really well to combine sort of the faster recharge rate shields so they can recover some of them more quickly, and then having some stronger shields on the same type of unit for absorbing that initial alpha strike, so you can get sort of a balance of those two strengths. I'm going to want to get both of these, and then I'll get this when we want to jump up to the planetary shields. And then finally, our power plants. So our fission mastery here would jump our fission reactor up from 72 to 86 output, still size 22, and about the same amount of fuel efficiency. Caslon, 3.83 units. Important to remember that as we take a look down here at quantum exploitation. And this really is a quantum leap in effectiveness. See 120 energy output, and it's also significantly smaller. It's even more fuel efficient with Caslon, 3.5 fuel units. So there's nothing about this that isn't better than the fission reactor. The only reason that we'd want to go up to here is if, okay, we didn't want to retrofit to this. But it's a big enough jump, I think it's worth the retrofit. Now, this is also the point at which we have the option of going hydrogen instead of Caslon, and it's even more efficient in terms of amount of fuel being used. However, the energy output, it's better than compared to our fission mastery here, but it's not as good compared to the quantum exploitation. Even though it's smaller, it's not smaller enough to really balance that out. So the question is really, do we want to go hydrogen at this point and go with a more efficient fuel? But I think I'm going to want to stick with quantum exploitation for now. And then, of course, again, another case we're going to want to follow both paths, eventually come up here to fusion balance. But we're not going to grab this tech at all. Again, it leads to nothing. So now, which of these handful that I've just grabbed, and I will grab the large-scale construction afterwards, do I want to really prioritize? Well, I think what I want to have here is get the quantum exploitation for the new reactors and also get the damage control, and then from there probably do a set of retrofitting as I'm able. And then the proton engines would simply, of course, improve themselves where they are without the need for retrofit. Then I would grab the shields and the large-scale construction, and perhaps by that do another round of retrofitting. And all of these together now is really going to last several years in terms of our research. Each of these projects taking about a year on their own. So we should be set for a while on our energy and construction thoughts. So back to our battle now. Having sort of set the stage for what we are trying to accomplish, let's just see how this goes. And of course, once again, I have my command ship. I want it to hang out here along with the Marines. I want them to hang out here. And I want everybody to simply stay away except for the main group, which can continue their attack. And they got some ships hanging out in here, but we're going to fire at them. Okay. And yeah, you're going the wrong way, buddy. Turn around. Don't get caught in there in that. I said don't get caught in there in that. There we go. Got caught. It's fighting the tractor beam. That tractor beam is wanting to cause trouble for us. But we're now through the shield. They sucked one of our ships in and destroyed it. But you can see how quickly our much larger amount is just going through this, knocking down the firepower. Compared to before, this is a much faster rate of destruction. And boom, boom, boom it goes. Okay. And we're gonna just quickly throw everybody back into the same group. Let's find our Marines. Okay, well, the two of you, looks like you're going to be heading over to reserves because you did get damaged. But the rest of you can rejoin the primary fleet. And okay, none of them got damaged. Outstanding. Now, where are we going to go from here? Well, obviously, other than seeking our repairs, I want all of you to head down this way, because you may recall we found some of them in here. So I want to send our fleet down to Malthor and clear them out, all the Savage Sun that are there, and we've pushed them back in this area at least for the time being. We'll see how they react to all of that. Didn't actually destroy that many of their ships. But then from here, we'll go refuel, and then we will want to head down here and clear out this system and get the mother lode of treasure that is available to us there. About another year forward, and we have reached Urctun, having cleared out all of our business with the Savage Sun and everything else. And it's time now to take control of the Loros fruit and everything else over here on Urctun 3. So we're going to try to capture this station, only sending in a handful of marine frigates, as it's not a very powerful mining station, plus we don't want to accidentally destroy it, which could very well happen. Okay, Distress of Kerbis has finished retrofitting. So you can head, let's see, I think I'm going to have you down this way. And yeah, we know what's in there. That's the black market cartel remnants. Let's work on the rest of this sector, however. And I'll move all of you in a bit. I want to get all of this under control. Oh. Countermeasures skill. Very nice, Admiral. It appears that's going to go well for us. Of course, the battle's continuing elsewhere. And we do indeed have this station under our control. So we'll want to do a little bit of repairing there eventually. But all of this loveliness now belongs to us. And boy, the polymer and the carbon fiber even, not to mention all the luxuries, really going to be a huge benefit to us, as well as we still have not found another location for Megalos nut. And if we look at our Megalos nut, it's almost gone. So that's just a massive boon to us. Now I should mention a few other things that have occurred. We did find a derelict cruiser, so we're going to be getting that retired and perhaps getting some more technology out of that. We have also had a bit of an issue with our construction ships. I let them go a little bit too long with their current design. They had 3 cargo bays, and that was proving not be enough for some of the mining bases. They were having to make a couple trips, so I've upped those to 5 to just sort of correct that problem, and they're all retrofitting now, so bit of a pause there in expanding our mining operations, but not too bad. More diplomatic contacts as well. First of all, we found the Dervella Hive. We knew where they were before, but they are now over here, so that's closing off one more bit of direction. We'll have more pirates up here, but thankfully they are exceptionally wimpy. And then in our overall contacts, we have 3 more just in the past year that have shown up. So we have the Patrime Corporation, and they are Teekans. They want to start few wars, destroy sand slugs. Only 1 destroyed. Boy, that's a low bar. They want to have the highest private revenue, but they're not quite as high as us. Still doing well. And they want to have the most trade income, and we're also number 1 there. Then the Gindeni Corporation, and they're Hakunish, but look at their territory. They're up to 3 colonies, and so is the Utrantu Collective. Nobody else has expanded even to 2, but those 2 empires have 3 now. So that's going to be something to look forward to as them being our potential rivals going forward. But another one that wants a bunch of trade bonuses. And then intelligence mission intercepts, carry out intelligence missions. So the Hakonish very much into espionage. And they want to control one of the super luxury, or they're calling it here, restricted resources. Well, right now they don't control any of them. We just got our second one with an eye on a third. And then quite a bit more wimpy down here is the Gurki Empire. They look like a bunch of T-Rexes. They're Naxilians. And they want to control both ice and continental colonies, interestingly, as the majority of their race victory conditions. They also want a bunch of trade agreements and resort bases. Here's our research situation, where we have moved on now from the 3rd tier of weapons into the 4th, and we're going to be going for some new armor. And then a couple of different advances that are going to improve our boarding, the shipboard marines, improving the attack. And then we also have just improved assault techniques, boosting our assault strength mainly by about 30% or so from there. And then we are also just basically looking at improving the current ones we're using. The EMP defenses here is new. That's basically an anti-ion weapon defense system. But this is worth looking at down here in terms of the fighters and strike craft, whatever you wish to call them. But notice that on the tactical interceptors, it says on the right, enables building of carriers when construction size allows. Now, this is not at all intuitive to me. One of the common questions that comes up is, well, how do you build carriers? Well, you have to research tactical interceptors in order to do them. Why tactical interceptors? Why not one of the other types? Why is this even under the weapon side? I do not know. But nonetheless, there it is. In a bit, we're going to be taking a look at the updated weapon situation, but really not that much has changed. Then on the high-tech and industrial side, we're now working on the last one that we had set up before, marshy swamp colonization, and we will eventually be moving up to the 4th tier here as well, but for now I just want to finish up this 3rd tier. So we're going to get our better sensors for proximities array, and then our better sensors for resource gathering, basically just almost doubles the range of those, and then also boosting the troop and passenger transport. So let's take a look at the weapons side a bit. If we were to make a new ship, and a lot of these, again, have not really changed all that much. Now, we do have the nuclear devastator. Again, that's the bombard weapon. Concussion versus torpedo is one that's worth considering here a bit. 520 range, 6 damage, etc. The gap between these two has narrowed, but it's still definitely an advantage for the missile. Now, the torpedo is about 50% larger, and it requires almost twice as much energy. Fire rate is about the same, but it has much more damage and significantly more range than it had before. It's almost as long a range, 460, compared to the 520 for the missile. However, at this range, it's going to do a little over 3 points of damage, so it's still got to close in quite a bit to really get more bang for its buck. And if you turn it into a short-range weapon, it's only going to do maybe a little bit over 30% of our current damage that we're getting out of, for example, the railguns. And that's before you account for the energy situation, which also would not work in its favor. So it's still not as good at short range as some of our other short-range weapons, and not as good at long range as our missiles. Now you might say, well, what if the enemy is heavily armored? The torpedo doesn't have the armor weakness that the missiles do, and you could factor all of that in. But I still don't think it's balanced out to where it's worth investing in these just yet. Now, we already noted before that the heavy railgun appears, just due to its size and due to the fact that it has less than half the fire rate of the railgun, it does punch a little harder. But again, I don't really think it's useful unless you don't have another option for dealing with, again, heavily armored targets. Say you invested just in railguns and you weren't, for example, having the other option of investing in blasters. We're sort of investing across the board, but if you weren't doing that, then you might want to use the heavy railgun at times. I can see that, because if you're going to invest in railguns, you're going to need to eventually get this tech. Since that's not our situation, we can sort of shove that off to the side. We do have, of course, improvements again. They have gotten somewhat better in the area weapons, the Intimidator Surge Wave. I still don't think that these are a good option to invest in unless we're really looking at throwing a bunch of them on bases, which, again, I prefer to use the mobile defense option with the fleets. But I might start thinking about putting, for example, one of these on a command ship. Maybe if I were to build carriers, I might start throwing one on there. The bottom line is, most of the time, we're not facing enough enemies to make this worth it. We're usually outnumbering the enemies, and sort of the strength of our economy even is just making it not really necessary to go with this type of a weapon. So the main thing that the 3rd tier of tech has really given us is allowing us to use, for example, the ion cannons for disabling the enemy, getting the point defense cannons, that type of thing, the tractor beams. It's really just given us some more tools, more than it has, at least yet, changed the dynamic of which of our earlier weapons we're actually going to want to deploy. And I'm going to keep the weapons on my patrol frigates and my marine frigates just as they are. So looking at the broader picture then, we have down here more pirates we're going to want to handle eventually. Now there's actually 2 of the Red Star pirate spaceports that they're building up in here. Also have the Venomous Confederacy. This is where the Caribbean Spice, the 3rd of our super luxury resources, is. But I think going forward from now, we have enough military to really have a pretty solid defensive group in all of our systems, and then a sizable amount beyond that. So we really should be able to do some fairly full-time just smashing pirates. And my idea is to just sort of get rid of everybody. Obviously, we're going to be getting rid of the very wimpy pirates that are in here, which I believe are the Savage Council. Yes, they are. And then we're going to simply be going around and getting rid of more. The lone pirates right now are the most powerful one, definitely the most powerful one within range. Sinister Salvage have really slowed down and sort of stabilized. So we're okay with them for the moment. But pushing out our defensive perimeter and really taking a decisive upper hand in the pirate wars, that's where I'm aiming now. I do want to look at one more thing in terms of our colonies, because if we take a look at Reese here, we're about halfway done with this installation. Okay, a little bit more than that. But then if we take a look at Brax, for example, Lacuro first actually, we are no longer having any growth penalties. So you can see we're up over 19% here, and look at that. We have Keterovs. There was somebody that was asking, can other races combine their population on a planet? Absolutely they can. And there's going to be a lot more involved migration issues, as I mentioned earlier, when we get into later in the game. But we are now starting to have some of these join us. And this also adds in another sort of strategic consideration. Your planets that are nearby the borders of the enemies, it will actually do better if you have really good conditions on those planets, because then you're more likely to take population from the enemy rather than dispense it. Migration doesn't play a huge factor, but it's still going to be something fairly important. However, on Brax, we are still doing some retrofitting down here. We did finish up the spaceport all the way up to the medium level, but it looks like it actually just recently finished because it was having problems with shortages. It looks like we just finished our shortages here. Okay, so that means we're ready to expand again because we now have enough resources everywhere. Probably need to retrofit a little bit here as well, but we're doing much better. I'm going to bet that we're going to be looking much better in our freighter situation then, if that's the case. Let's take a look. Well, not a lot. We do have some that are free, but it looks like maybe they're just finishing up the end of their current transport runs. So our next target is going to be in Halmat, up in here by the Urctun Collective. If we take a look at some of our possibilities, we've got a lot more listed here now because we have the Desert Teekans as well. They want to land on desert planets. But Halmat, the key thing here is if we sort everything by quality, we're going to see that, okay, this is number one by a good distance, other than we also have Narc 2 down here, and I don't feel like projecting all the way down there until we secure some of these pirate areas. So, Halmat over here, we cleared out the Savage Sun. We should be able to grab that. Not a huge planet, but again, the quality really hits the spot. And then we may consider after that one, we might look at some of these desert options as possibilities. One of those desert situations is the actual location of the Caribbean spice. Interesting. And then there's a better quality one over here at Dinaskar, right over this way. So that really gives us some additional options that we can go for, and soon we'll be able to colonize marshy swamps, and that's going to add another category of planets to us. So our choices in where to colonize have grown from very few, although we still can't colonize in all of these ones that are red because they're too far away. But we're definitely greatly expanding, and you can see that really our economy keeping up with keeping the colonies supplied is going to be a much bigger factor than actually having to worry about, okay, do we have enough places to actually land on? So the Akuro Commonwealth will continue to look forward at grabbing as much territory as we can before anybody else grabs it away from us. And that process will continue when we return. Thanks for watching, everyone.